Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who are dealing with somebody in their life who happens to be a sun or moon in Scorpio narcissist. And this can be a variety of relationships. It can be a boss, it can be a parent, and you are an adult child dealing with a parent. It can be obviously a significant other. So it should go without saying that this is not a clinical diagnosis. I'm not trying to diagnose anyone. I'm not in the mental health field. I'm not a professional in that area. But we have to use some kind of label in order to come to a consensus about what we're talking about here. And by the way, when I say narcissist, I'm also talking about other problem personalities. So it's an umbrella term, and what it is really meant to convey is are people who dominate you with their problems or their bad behavior. And some of that, most of it, is going to be targeted against you. But whatever is going on, you feel that having a relationship with this person may be draining, may be disturbing, like upsetting to you, disruptive in your life, and it just doesn't add to your life. And that's why you're concerned about maintaining such a relationship. The other thing I wanted to say is that a couple of years ago, I did some videos on the moon in the various signs. And when I got to Scorpio, I knew it was going to be a doozy because even if you look online at material about moon and Scorpio or books that you have that describe it, they do describe it as being very challenging, okay? I'm talking specifically the moon in Scorpio because I was going to do a video on this. And so I did a video and I got some negative blowback, and it was a little bit more than usual. So I reconsidered my video. I took it down and I redid it. And I made it very clear that I thought I was a little bit too much tilting in the negative direction. And actually, the reason I did that wasn't because I was biased against Scorpio, moon and Scorpio people. It was really what I felt, but it was probably, there was too much of a percentage of the negative or shadow traits. This is because I believe that the moon is a shadow influence that you will see. If you want to compare what the sun in a sign is compared to the moon, you will see more of the shadow traits come out with the moon in that position, just by virtue of what these two heavenly bodies represent. But, taking into account the fact that these were people that were listening for themselves and wanting them to feel like they don't have something that's bad within themselves, I did alter it. But I'm a straightforward person. And so, I to some degree, it's going to be very, blunt, and some people, they kind of recoil. But in this particular video, this is going to be about people that are exhibiting negative traits. So the scorpionic traits that I mention here are going to be some of the shadow elements. So it's not one of those things that, hey, you're not being fair. This is supposed to be that way. And it has nothing to do with fairness. It's about the different templates of each sign, what the set of traits are. And actually, those traits will be tempered by other astrological placements. So there's no debate there. However, if somebody is showing a trait, If it walks like a duck, it's a duck. And talks like a duck, it's a duck. Okay, so the other thing that I want to state is that I believe that narcissism is coming from trauma. Trauma can be abuse in childhood. It can also be some sort of event that occurs that the child is involved with that shapes their life. It's a very dramatic event. So, it can run the gamut, but of course it'll be very frightening or, shocking, whatever it is. The death of a parent and the child has never experienced death, or it just comes out of nowhere, wasn't expected. And that can lead to controlling tendencies as adults for anybody. I want you to know that any of these qualities can show up in other signs. But they may have a different flavor based on their sun signs or their moon signs. But the qualities can definitely show up there too. And for the same reasons. For the same reasons, but expressed differently. That's really the main point. Because these traits are going to be present to one degree or another in all narcissists. And the goal is to control others, but also to try to find a way to get rid of their inner self-loathing that exists. In some cases, the person will act superior to others, but that's a front. They don't really feel superior to other people. They actually feel very threatened if they see somebody who they feel has a talent that they don't have, and they will try to destroy that person. But anyway, I'm actually going to be talking about some other traits that I associate especially with Scorpio. Now, Scorpio is a fixed water sign. Scorpio has a tendency to be very extreme in their emotional responses in life. And this includes with people. They either really love somebody, or they may be indifferent to them, or they may hate them. And when I say Scorpio, the general sign of Scorpio, but the more imbalanced a person is, the more they show up very problematic. This isn't all bad for the sign of Scorpio. If somebody loves deeply, it means that they're not fickle. There's nothing, good about somebody who is fickle, because they have a very shallow ability to love. So they just flit from one flower to the next like a butterfly that's just trying to suck at the nectar of a situation before they move on, before they suck it dry. Maybe I've got my Libra. No, I'm just kidding. But I was going to say, what am I going to do for Libra narcissists? Because the reason I say that is because Scorpio is much easier to do, because the negative, or I don't like the word negative, but the challenging aspect to Scorpio is more front and center than a sign like Libra that tends to come across very agreeable to other people. And maybe that's more, in a weird way, maybe that's more insidious, because you don't realize that they're a narc until the very end. With Scorpio, they tend to bring those heavy characteristics with them very openly. And the problem is that you may be if this is especially like a spousal or, significant other situation, if you are somebody who comes from a lot of emotional neglect in your background, you may mistake this for, this person really, really loves me, because they're just coming on like gangbusters, and you don't see it as a red flag. So let's dive into this. The first thing that I put down was obsessive. And this is kind of going along with what I was just referring to, is that extreme of emotions produces a lot of difficulty for a Scorpio sun or moon to shift gears. So the like Scorpio is a fixed water sign, so the fixed quality can lend to fixating on somebody, which is what obsession is. And that person becomes, they make that person central to their existence, or just they become like totally immersed in that person. Now, in a positive way, it can simply be utter devotion. In a negative sense, they can be so afraid of that person ever leaving them that they actually push them away. And now that I think about it, a lot of these qualities are all, interconnected. So I'll just read the other qualities that I wrote down: controlling, secretive, accusatory, and then I put in parentheses suspicious, and vengeful. And to me, a lot of these are actually offshoots of the other. So controlling behaviors exist when somebody is obsessed, when somebody, they feel like they need this person, or that this person represents everything to them. But with a narcissist, this is the important thing, to separate a healthy Scorpio person from a narcissistic individual. The narcissist doesn't really care. They don't know how to love. But they can really give a good show of it. So you may be caught up in their snare, thinking that, oh, well, at least they really care about me, when in fact they are really not caring. They are trying to figure out how they can make it look like they care. And the other thing too is you may mistake controlling behavior, obsessive behavior, with caring. This does happen quite a bit, I think, or because healthy people tend to run away from that type of individual as soon as they see that behavior. They'll just, distance themselves right away because they become alarmed if it's very controlling. The person who is hungry for love, has been neglected or abused since childhood themselves. So, the person who is a victim of the narcissist probably comes from a background of abuse as well. But they're identifying as the victim, whereas the other person's identifying as the perpetrator, with the perpetrator. Okay. So understanding that when somebody is calling you 10 times a day and asking where you are, or trying to, you can tell that they're trying to keep tabs on you. I'm not talking about once or twice a day. I'm talking about excessively, always keeping tabs on you. That's a sign that they are afraid that you could be cheating, especially with Scorpio. Scorpio is naturally very suspicious in life. Suspicious tendencies are a sign of trust issues in that person. And again, this is not to demonize people. If somebody has been raised with a parent who just walked out on the family, that's going to leave a mark. That's going to be traumatic. And that child grows up to internalize this belief that people can abandon you at any time for any reason. And that makes me feel out of control. So what I'm going to do is try to control my environment to the nth degree. And that includes the people in the environment. So the narcissist looks at people as pawns on the chessboard. And you're there to make them feel safe, to make them feel superior, because they feel like trash. They have to make you feel like trash. they can't just, boost your self-esteem and try to practice self-love techniques for themselves. They don't understand that they are that they have this self-hatred, and they will never admit that they need help in dealing with this. This is the other thing too. When I say the word never, I'm really not saying I don't believe that people are incapable of change. So, in one sense, never say never, obviously. But unfortunately, these types are very unlikely to change because, in the first place, they are so lost within themselves. They truly, their ego, I'm talking about the unhealthy ego, has taken over so much. It's like a weed that has kind of like completely choked out their positive qualities. And so they live for being an energy vampire and just kind of feeding off of negativity that they generate. So when you say, when it's said misery loves company, that is the narcissist. Because they do feel so horrible inside. They don't want other people who they see as happy to be happy. So it's just as simple as that in a certain way of just, the put downs and the types of negative traits like being obsessive and calling and stuff. These are all offshoots of the same basic problem of a lack of self-love and a feeling of insecurity that a person will not leave. A boss who does this is going to be somebody who is very a put-down artist, thinking that, and especially if they know that the employee is a bit desperate, if they're like kind of, they know that this employee doesn't have many options in life, that will be their perfect victim, because other people will just say, talk to the hand and walk out. It reminds me of somebody, not a Scorpio boss, but somebody who I now think it's a boss I had who I think was a narcissist. And this person, exhibited certain behaviors, but I had already decided based on where I was coming from in life at that part of my journey, that I knew going into it, I said, you know what? I made a deal with myself, which I rarely do, but I said, you have to suck it up, and you just have to deal with this. I think it was my higher self that was telling me that I was going to have to experience this experience no matter what. And so because of my own background, I was able to deal with this individual because it was familiar to me, this narcissistic, negative type of behavior. One day, my boss hired a new person. Based on how the boss made these little comments during the day, that person never showed up again. And the boss was like, wow, they couldn't understand how somebody could leave. I totally understood. And it was very interesting. It's a very interesting thing to see how various people react to narcissistic types or problem personality types. Some people have zero tolerance and they will just leave because they're like, I don't need this. You know what I mean? I have other options in life. Or maybe they, for whatever reason, even if they feel like they're up against the wire, they still don't want to deal with this type of person. So I think that understanding that this is not going to, these types of people are not going to catch 100% of their potential victims is important to know. So when you're dealing with somebody who is suspicious of you, they will accuse you of things that you didn't do. And you will be on the defensive. And I have actually heard people talk about how, I don't know if they would lie. I mean, they didn't do whatever they were accused of doing, but the other person was convinced of it. That's how bad it was. And this is when the person who has the sun or moon in Scorpio, and if it's a sun sign, their Mercury might also be in Scorpio. Of course, if their moon is, they could have it too, but the sun specifically. And that could lead to very suspicious mind. These types of people can allow their imaginations to run away with them. They're creating this within themselves because they're creating their own hell. They're in hell, so they're just creating it around them. And that is a big, 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 big red flag. If you're with somebody, and this could be new in the relationship, and they're calling you all the time, and they're asking what you're doing, they're always asking for this running account, they're accusatory, or snooping through your things and saying, why do you have this on your browser or something like that, and they're just, you can tell they don't trust you. That is something to really consider if you want to be in a relationship with such a person, because it's very troubling behavior, to say the least. And it's controlling behavior because they're trying to make sure that they have you under their thumb. And it's obsessive. Where is their life? Somebody pointed out, because I started including the moon in the signs, and somebody said, I think the moon would be a more apt manifestation of this. And I tend to agree, but I wanted to include the sun because the sun will contain the seeds of those personality traits for sure. I'm not, the negative traits, not so much if the person is more balanced, obviously. But, so putting it out there can be very good for kind of identifying what is going on here with the sun and the moon. But the moon being the instinctual, the kind of like it's just happening without the person really being able to control it. It's just kind of hardwired into the person. And it's these kinds of emotions that are coming from being triggered from past experiences. So for sure, the moon in Scorpio might really be the key here. But sun in Scorpio people, perhaps in some cases also. And so there's also the quality of secretiveness in Scorpio, especially. But with all narcissists, there's a tendency to not be cooperative and not be forthcoming. So they want to be the ones that the not cooperating is simply, well, I need to be in control. But the not being forthcoming can be due to a tendency to feel that if they keep their own cards close to their vest, that they are in control of the situation. So the moon, well, I'm not going to just specify with the moon, but the Scorpio person may deeply care about somebody and be afraid of losing them. And if they're narcissists, they may not ever divulge it, because they don't want people to know their vulnerability. They want people to think that they are very strong. Vulnerability is a huge turnoff to Scorpios in general, even the healthier ones. There's a sense of it being weakness, which is really a misunderstanding of vulnerability. We're not talking about the covert narc who is always the victim. We're talking about just expressing a sense of vulnerability. a sense of feeling like, saying to another person, I feel exposed. I feel like if I share with you how I really feel, that you're going to use it against me, and that scares me. I don't want to feel this way. That's what somebody might say in a relationship, and when they're trying to open up and tell another person. So the Scorpio person may have even experienced this, where they shared something with somebody and that person betrayed their trust. Betrayal is a huge, huge fear in Scorpio, because they see it as a form of abandonment. Somebody who they were very attached to, who turns on them. And so, again, because these people are so afraid of it, it just is, the thought is so horrific, they will engage in behaviors to try to stem that. And that can lead to negative consequences, to say the least. And when somebody is secretive, one of the big problems with that is that the other person doesn't really get a chance to know them, doesn't really get a chance to find out what their vulnerabilities are, so that they can help them to heal, so that they can understand what makes them tick. So if they ever do exhibit certain negative traits, that other person will say, to themselves, this person is healing and they still have this tender spot within themselves. But no, they won't. A lot of the times they will not tell what has happened. As a matter of fact, I was noting this, that I believe that water sign parents in particular can be secretive about their past, where they don't talk about their childhood, for instance. And perhaps that is because it is so painful that even reliving it is too much for them. So they try to shut it down. And this leads to that fragmentation that creates, the shadow. And this is why it's so hard to retrieve that, because they have disowned it so deeply. So, and therefore it's hard to rehabilitate oneself when you're not even aware of all of that stuff. But you are aware of it on some level. That's where projection comes in. People project that inner filth onto others. Or when I say filth, it's that they feel bad about themselves, but it's coming from that place of having been mistreated, abused. And by the way, I did get a comment from somebody on a different video that's, said, what, I think this is me. And I wrote back to them and I said, if you really can see yourself, you're probably not the classic narcissist, because they can't. That's what makes them so freaking, why it's so maddening to deal with these people, because they don't see that there's a problem within themselves. They can only see your problems. So if you happen to be listening for yourself, I want you to know that just by you wanting to learn about yourself, or to see if maybe I touched upon some things that deep down inside you need to work on, that's a good sign. And I definitely am an eternal optimist, and I think that a lot of people can heal from some of these challenging traits. But the openness to heal is the key, and you obviously are showing it. So I wanted to get that out there. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is vengefulness, because this is a very infamous scorpionic trait. Vengefulness can come even in the mildest forms. I find it vengeful when I read reviews on Yelp where the person talks about going into a restaurant or a cafe or what have you, and they were not greeted, they were kind of ignored. And I've had this experience many, many, many times, treated coldly, and it hurts. It hurts me. Maybe it doesn't hurt people that much, but I'm a very sensitive person. It hurts me very much so. But I don't feel angry. I feel like uncomfortable. There's like a difference. But some people, because of that discomfort, or that if it triggers anger within them, they run home, or they might be right in the cafe, and they start tearing down the place. They start saying the food sucked. Everything is really based on the fact that they were treated that way, or they felt that they were treated that way, because you can't read somebody's mind. You don't know, maybe their parent died that day, or maybe they just left their partner and they're just devastated. You have no idea what's going on in somebody's mind, why they're not being nice to you, why they're being kind of aloof or something. So you can't jump to conclusions. But these people do. And they, because the thing is, what's going on there? That type of person has a very, very, very shaky sense of self-confidence or self-worth. And therefore I was looking for another word. Because of this, that fear of self-hatred that is being triggered by somebody being cold to them is so great. They got to get rid of it. They got to get rid of it. So they, okay, I'm going to just dump it on them. And they give it 1 star. That's their revenge. And this is destructive. It may not be the nth degree, but it is destructive because you're harming somebody's livelihood. You know, I can't believe that people are that asleep at what they're doing, at what they're creating. I could say the karma that they're creating, but I don't mean future punishment. I mean through their actions, the reverberations. And those reverberations have to come back to them at some point because, there's cause and effect in the universe. But it's not about punishment. It's just about, it's not even about you can't get away with anything. There are some people that get away with crimes that are more serious than leaving a bad review on Yelp. There are people that go to their deathbed having gotten away with crimes. We know that. But in that life, there was hell that they lived through because you cannot hurt other people and be at peace. It doesn't go together. And narcissists are not at peace. That's one of the other things. This is why they are always trying to mess with people because they are feeding off of them. So the thing to understand is that if you're dealing with somebody like this, who's showing traits of not having forgiveness, even if, sometimes they may even goad you into something and then act like the victim. That's another trait. I don't know if Scorpios would do that specifically. That might be another type of narc, maybe like a cancer narc or something, where it's more of a aggressive than passive situation. But the bottom line is that a lack of forgiveness is also punishing oneself because it's you're living, the person who does that is living in a constant state of resentment, anger. And not to say that if you forgive somebody that you're absolving them of all responsibility of what they did or that you're forgetting what they did. You can't forget what somebody does. It's just, it's going to stay with you. That makes sense. But the point is that when you can't forgive somebody, you're not seeing their human traits. You're saying they should have had, certain traits that they just simply did not possess. And when you see the bigger picture, you realize there are no victims, only volunteers. And I mean that at the highest level, volunteering to experience something in order to create expansion within the soul and also to serve as a teacher to others. So this is one of the reasons why it's very, very complicated when we're talking about, meting out so-called justice and what that entails. And so a Scorpio parent, are they like unforgiving towards their children? One of the things about narcissists is that they one of the reasons that they use other people is to make them look good. So a narcissistic narcissistic parent is going to be, and this is true for all narc parents, to be honest with you, they use their children to look good because they're not, their child is yet another accessory for their very, very, very low self-esteem to be raised. But that child or that adult child, they don't respect their feelings. They don't really care deeply about what the child is, but about their experiences. They just want that sort of glory in connection with the child. So how do you deal with these people? Well, first of all, if you notice some of these more troubling traits and you're in a relationship with them, it's, a good idea to start your exit strategy in whatever way you can. Sometimes you might have to do it in a very, depending on how bad it is, in a very covert way, because these people, like I said, they can be very vengeful. And it's something that is not easy. If you're right at the beginning of the relationship, this is the best time to bail. This is the best time, and not to say, you don't want to tell this person, if you really feel that they're kind of a dangerous individual, you don't want to share the truth with them. Whatever it is that you say, don't make it about them, because that triggers them. And one thing I want to say too, this is important because this may be part of the obsessive situation that's going on. If you're dealing with somebody who love bombs you, who you meet and they are already talking about, we should be together forever and things like that, that is a definite red flag. And if you're coming from a feeling of being love-starved, you may think, oh, wow, this person's crazy about me. No, they're just crazy. So that kind of thing, if somebody is secretive and they refuse to divulge a lot of their past, that's a red flag. Look at that. And I personally, I'm in a relationship right now, but I would not deal with somebody like that, because I feel like we can't have open communication because they're not really being straight with me. If somebody starts accusing you of things you didn't do or calling you, that's an obsessive quality all these times a day and things like that, that's a red flag. So it's like backing away slowly from such a person. Don't let them know that you're onto them. Just keep it neutral. If this is a parent, you have to gauge what you're comfortable with. Some people who have narc parents go low contact. You have to see if that works for you, because sometimes that can be hard to juggle. Sometimes when somebody is very, very toxic, even low contact can affect the victim of narcissistic abuse and for a long time afterwards. And you would think if you have limited exposure with somebody that it's tolerable, but sometimes it's just not. And you just have to realize that. So I hope that this, well, in a way, I hope it didn't resonate, because that means that you're not dealing with such such a challenging situation. But if you have been dealing with it and you want to explore more a relationship, I do chart comparisons. I do them in my own way. I don't like do those synastry charts, just because I don't like the way that they look. And, when I'm trying to do something, I want it to be as clear as possible for me. So I do love readings in that vein, using people's astrological charts. And I also do natal chart interpretations for people, for themselves, and look at the transits, the kind of the themes that are coming up in the next year, and that sort of thing. So my website is renamoonastrology.com. The link is below. Take care. Thanks for listening. Bye.